Welcome to Horror Melee,
a podcast born of a group of people who love to talk and debate horror.
Every episode, one of us picks a movie to review, and the rest of us must either suffer or enjoy that pick.
Turn your brain off and enjoy.
I took some CBD oil to calm down, and now I feel like I'm in a weird headspace, which I think is like absolutely perfect for what we're about to talk about.
Yeah.
Patrick has vertigo, I think we're ready for some psychosexual analysis about a 1970s Italian giallo. On this episode, we have Holly.
Hello.
And Patrick.
Ooh, hey.
And we are going to discuss the 1972 giallo, All the Colors of the Dark, or Tutti I Colori del Buio.
Perfect. Perfect.
I don't know if that was said correctly in Italian, but All the Colors of the Dark is about a woman recovering from a car accident in which she lost her unborn child, finds herself plagued by nightmares of a knife-wielding, blue-eyed man, while her family, consisting of her partner Richard and her sister Barbara, offers her pharmaceutical vitamins and psychiatric analysis. Jane's mysterious neighbor offers to cure her by means of a black mass. However, the erotic rituals only aggravate her condition, catapulting her into a kaleidoscope of psychedelic horror.
You have crossed every barrier to reality. You are beyond its limits. And you'll never see it again. They're coming to get you. You!
I'm always certain that someone is after me. Someone from my past. From something that happened in my childhood. Do believe in this sort of thing. All that and much more.
They exist. They're coming to get you. They bear the mark of the devil inside them. They're coming to get you.
She offers herself. Free her from fear.
I chose this movie because I love giallos. They're weird. They're outlandish. They're like serious, but then they're super ridiculous. I love the fashion, the silent but deadly looks and stares, and of course the scenery of Europe in the 60s and 70s. Usually I never think about giallos beyond their just ridiculousness, and while preparing to discuss this movie and watching All the Colors of the Dark a few times and reading up on it and listening to interviews, I have a greater appreciation for giallos, as they're definitely deeper than I realized. A lot of them reflect political and social issues of their time. So something that you think is just drama is actually telling you a story and has substance to it beyond just like a beautiful lady in a shower. initial thoughts of this movie, Holly?
So, I have a slight little confession to make, and I think I've seen about 2 giallos in my lifetime. This being number 2.
And that's understandable. They're
Yeah.
they're not really prominent.
Yeah, I don't know. I think when I first started watching horror, like I didn't know anything about them. And then when they came onto my radar, I was just so busy like getting everything I could that was like coming out at the time and like seeing what was current that, you know, it just kind of it didn't seem like a genre that I was too into watching, so I kind of put it on the back burner. And I had a lot of fun with it. I really liked it. It was it definitely I definitely saw the parallels to Rosemary's Baby, and I think this was well I have read a lot of reviews saying that this isn't people wouldn't consider this a true giallo because of we'll talk about that later, but a lot of people don't consider it one, but I think this is a great introduction because Rosemary's Baby is my favorite horror movie, and I do love like the mystery shows like Poirot and Murder She Wrote, and it just this one combined both of those things, and I just had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah, the first time I watched it, I definitely felt the inspiration of Rosemary's Baby, and then watching an interview with Sergio Martino, the director, where he said he was influenced by Rosemary's Baby, I was like, yes! I felt so like a film like academic because I could recognize the influence, and hearing a director say he was influenced by it, I was like, oh my God, I feel really smart right now. Patrick?
So I never really got into a lot of the giallos until you told me about them. And even then, I'm with Holly. I've only seen a handful, probably less than 5, which is weird because when I was in high school, I helped run this film club, and whenever we did foreign films, we were always obsessed with the French New Wave, from like the 1950s and 60s. But being a huge noir fan for like, American noir films, and this literally giallo being like a crime like esque movie, so it's almost noir like, kind of, I just don't know why I never got into them. But this movie was not anything like what I was thinking going in. I thought it was going to be very different, not so psychedelic, not so dreamlike, which I did like, and there was a lot of aspects I really like about this film. I didn't really see the connection with Rosemary's Baby until the second time around, because I read about it, and I was like, oh, I see. Connect the dots. But overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I do have a few complaints. Like, I love the soundtrack to this movie is phenomenal. But we can go into, like, how it does not play with any scenes at all. But is that on purpose, or is it not on purpose? Which we can get in deeper in later on when we talk about this. The soundtrack alone could be it could have been its own produced thing, and I would have listened to it.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal.
For sure.
So I used to travel a lot for work, and Netflix doesn't work in every single country. So a way for me to watch horror movies would be to watch them on YouTube, and YouTube has tons of giallos. So All the Colors of the Dark was directed by Sergio Martino. He made a lot of great giallos, including Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. Come on. Look at a title like that.
Yeah, that's been on my list for a while.
Torso's been on my list.
Torso? Yes.
Yeah.
Like, once you start like reading up on this, you start reading other like movies and options, and you can go down a giallo hole of synopsis and
my favorite
summaries
gelato.
and film titles. All the Colors of the Dark stars the Giallo Queen, Edwidge Fenech, as Jane.
My new crush.
Oh, man.
It's just not fair.
I'm not going to objectify women, but goddamn. Edwidge Fenech. Baby girl. She also stars in a lot of Sergio Martino's giallos, so you can definitely go down an Edwidge Fenech hole of giallos. This movie also stars George Hilton, who I love is like, I think from South America, and I love with a name like George Hilton. He stars as Richard, Jane's partner, and Ivan Rasimov as the blue-eyed stalker.
So before we jump into everything, it was so weird watching these characters because they all look so similar besides Jane. Like,
yes.
Yeah.
I was like, is that Richard? No, that's the blue-eyed guy. Is that Richard? Yeah, okay, that's Richard. Is that Barbara? No, that's not. That's Mary. Like,
wow, okay. Usually I'm terrible with deciphering what people look like, but I did not have that issue. Although the dream sequences where Jane was having the ridiculous dream sequence and it was her mom, I thought her mom was her.
yeah.
But it wasn't. And then in the dream sequence, you had older version of the blue-eyed stalker versus the younger version of the blue-eyed stalker.
So it was just their parents?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get that until the second time around. Because I read about it.
Yeah, I read that it was supposed to be her mom. I was like, oh, okay, there we go. That makes sense.
Right?
Yeah.
But I think it was just the way the makeup was done on a lot of people that made them all look so similar. Like, all the females' makeup was done exactly the same. And it never changed throughout the film, even when they were showering or anything like that. It was always exactly the same. And the men wore pretty much the same jackets, the same brownish clothing. Like, it got a little confusing some parts.
So how did you guys watch this movie? Because there's a few options, and I will also say that this movie was released under alternate titles. The alternate titles of this movie are Day of the Maniac and They're Coming to Get You, which I love.
Of course, those are probably the American releases, aren't they?
So I watched the version on Shudder, which is in Italian with English subtitles.
Yep, that's how I watched it.
Me too.
I got confused because, like, the opening line was in English, and then it went to Italian, and I was like, what's happening here? Did I click something? So I, paused it, and I was like, no, it's supposed to be in Italian.
Fantasy versus reality. Like, what's real? What's not real? I don't know.
It started 2 days ago for me. It's just been a ride since.
So the film starts with, like, a sunset as the credits are rolling. All the colors of the dark. You know, you watch the sunset as the colors go into the darkness of the night. So the film kicks off with just, like, transformation of going into darkness. And then we are abruptly brought into a ridiculous dream sequence with some weird drag queen, a pregnant person, and people getting stabbed. What did you guys think about that whole opening sequence?
That lady doing the robot in the beginning, like the drag queen,
right?
Reminded me of a homeless woman that lived, like, kind of downtown Vegas where I used to live. And because her teeth were just so gross like that. Not that she, like, looked like the woman, but her teeth, and it reminded me of it. So I, like, kind of was, like, creeped out by her. And then her doing that weird dance, which I had no idea why she was dancing like that in this entire scene. Because you have the pregnant woman just staring at you, rubbing blood all over her. And then you have the one girl getting stabbed, and the guy stabbing her. And then a lady, was she riding a bike or on something? But she was walking around doing the robot. And I was so confused about her part. Because I was confused about the whole scene. And I was like, what? But her specific part, I was like, I guess I get kind of these two, but what is this? What is this one random person dressed like a clown maid with disgusting teeth dancing. So I got really confused about that right away.
And the thing is, like, this is what I love about movies like this, because they're so ridiculous. Like, this movie starts off quiet sunset and then a weird ass dream sequence, and I am like, yes, I cannot wait to see what happens.
But here's the thing. Even after I read up on the movie and I watched it a second time, I still have no idea what her role is, what she represents. So if you guys know, fill me in, because I have no idea.
Unfortunately, I cannot fill you in because I don't know, but I was caught completely off guard.
Yes, I love that. I love that.
And robot dancing person reminded me of the bad guys from a Doctor Who episode, The Girl in the Fireplace. It was
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
with the animatronic,
yeah,
like 18th century Victorian
marionette
people.
Yeah.
That's a good episode.
Yeah, it's a really good episode. They creep me out. So it reminded me of that. So I was creeped out. I was very confused. I was like, wow, there's got to be a lot of metaphors going on right here, and I have no idea what this ride is going to take me on, but I really want to find out what this all means. So, all right, show me. What is this?
Yeah. I thought that the weird robot lady was the blue-eyed stalker. I couldn't tell if it was the same person in makeup, but within like 15 minutes of this film, we already know that Jane has trauma. She lost her baby in a car crash caused by Richard. Her mom was murdered when she was 5. And this film is all about not knowing who to trust, not knowing who to believe, like the colors of the darkness, like unsure of like your own thoughts. And I love how this film immediately gets into the story, and I'm just as confused as Jane is, you know?
See, I didn't catch that Richard was the cause of the baby's death, because I don't think they say it until like towards the end of the film or halfway through the film.
No, when Richard is meeting with Barbara's like, yeah, if you didn't crash that car into the tree, then, she wouldn't be in her position.
Where he's staring at his wife's sister nude, that scene.
Oh,
that's right.
I mean, because like even in the movie, you're like, you have Richard and Barbara, and as soon as they are introduced, as a viewer, you don't know who you could trust. You have Richard giving her weird blue pills and feeding her like a little baby.
Vitamins.
He's a pharmaceutical sales guy. And then you have Barbara, who works for a psychiatrist who wants to use psychoanalysis. They each tell Jane that the other person isn't giving the right information. And Jane is just like, I don't know what to do. I was in a car crash. I lost my bambino. I'm all sorts of trauma, and I don't want to have sex with Richard. So.
Yeah, and so I was thinking about them, and this is Jane's story. So
yes.
you're looking at Barbara and Richard. It's like, oh, I don't know who to trust. They have such opposite ideas, but then their constant bickering. I was like, oh, this kind of then tips the scales towards Jane. Is Jane an unreliable narrator, and we're just witnessing her descent into madness and her losing control on reality, because Barbara and Richard are fighting about very real things, and they seem just so hyper focused on fighting with each other and proving which one is right. And it's also a good kind of analogy for just dealing with trauma. Like, people are,
yes,
you should do this, and you're ignoring the person who's going through the situation, and you're essentially doing more damage. So it's a constant, is there somebody that I can't trust? Is somebody gaslighting her? Like, what's the end game? Or is this just us witnessing what's in her mind. And I liked going through that ride throughout the whole movie.
Yeah. Richard, I always thought was a bad guy anyways, through the end of the movie, just because, I don't know, just the way he acted and treated people in the movie. I was like, yeah, this guy sucks no matter what.
He was kind of a jerk.
Even towards the end, I was like, this dude sucks. But I did, like you said, when they were bickering, I did side with Barbara more than I did with Richard, and I was like going towards that way compared to anything Richard did, because I just automatically hated Richard, mainly because he forced her to take those pills. I was like, I would never force anyone to take anything like that. And you're a pharmaceutical sales rep, you're just digging into your own stash. Like, this is things you don't do.
All right, so I got a little hung up on this whole him being a pharmaceutical rep because I work in, granted, the billing department of a behavioral health practice, but all the reps that come in with medication, they talk to the psychiatrist. And I'm just so curious as to how that, like, what is he selling? Who is he working for? Who is he selling to? Because in my world that I know, they all work with the psychiatrist. So it was very jarring to me to see that opposition between him and Barbara.
Yeah. And one line that I love that Jane says early on in the movie in her taxi ride with Barbara to the psychiatrist, Jane says, I don't know what to do anymore, Barbara. I know he loves me, but he's not able to understand me. And day after day, I feel like I'm sinking further into the abyss. Right?
Spoke to my heart.
Oh, you know, you could tell Jane's in the middle of a tug of war, and I love that this movie builds uncertainty in all the characters.
Yeah, because it's weird though, like, they bring in the uncertainty, right, with all the characters, and then Jane is the one who kind of sets up this more bigger picture of, like, all these uncertain things, and she's, like, leading you this way, leading you that way. But they bring in the whole, you know, the black arts and, like, the satanic aspect to it, and then you kind of get the feeling it's, like, more them, right? Which I kind of like the idea of it being just psychological and Jane, and not, like, this physical thing, which kind of threw me off when I first watched it as well, because it kind of took me out of, because I was dead set on one direction, and then it takes me over here, but it's still trying to bring in this other, you know, trying to merge both directions. So it did make me feel lost, which could have been the point, you know, be as lost as Jane, you know, but I don't know, the physical aspect of it's so weird. It's like, because it's a supernatural physical aspect of the film.
Yeah, I definitely see your sentiments, and I kind of felt that way, but I also love a good occult story. So
Jane is at a point, and she is so desperate to get better because she doesn't want to lose Richard. So Jane meets her neighbor, Mary, who I absolutely love. Mary blinked once during the entirety of the film. And my favorite scene is when, like, again, like, early on, like, Jane's looking out her window as Richard's, like, walking away. And then, like, you see Mary, like, pull the curtain. Mary doesn't smile. She has stone cold looks the whole time. And when she talks, she's like a robot, and I love it. I fucking love it.
Yeah.
I mean, she just pulls Jane in, and she empathizes with her. And you see all these people manipulating Jane, and then you see Mary manipulate Jane. And it's just so well done and poetic.
It's almost like, even though she is manipulating her, bringing her in, she's doing it so gentle.
Yes.
And just almost lovingly.
Yes.
Because she does seem very, when was it? It was, I think the second time they were doing a Sabbath grouping thing, and they had that one scene where Mary like said a line and then they repeated it. That scene, she looked very, like the way she was posed and the lighting and everything, she looked very angelic, and she definitely took on that mother role. And then I was trying to play with the parallels of like this satanic cult, and then like her being like this angelic like person and being like a guiding light for Jane. And I didn't get very far in my thinking with that, but I was flirting with those ideas. But yeah, she definitely, like she was telling Jane before, you're like a lost child looking for a mother, and she definitely was that for her.
Yeah, but at the same time, like, oh, you're a lost child looking for your mother. Yeah, mommy's abandoning you, and I just made your life worse. Like, that's, you could say it's motherly, but at the same time, what she did is, it's pure selfishness.
Oh, I didn't say it was good motherly.
Well, yeah.
It was only for her. It was only for Mary to move along.
Yeah, but okay. So Jane, so Mary, we learn, is in a satanic cult, and Mary offers an actual ear for Jane to talk to, you know, in between Richard and Barbara arguing. So Jane gravitates towards Mary, and Mary's like, you know, I can help you. Have you ever heard of a Sabbath? You should come. Jane ends up at Downton Abbey, puts on a black robe, and then walks down these steps in a wonderful intro to a satanic cult.
You know what I would kill to be offered just to come and see the ritual? She literally just walks into her house like, hey, do you want to come check the Sabbath thing out? Could be pretty cool. Not once has that ever happened to me. Not once.
How agreeable are you in real life? Because Jane apparently is very agreeable. Oh, I have to go cook dinner. It's only 5. Okay.
I know, right?
And then when the attorney calls, come to this address at this time. Okay.
Yeah. First off, I would never go. They're like, come meet me here. Be like, I need more information on this. Come meet me here. No.
Yeah. I'm at this house number 5.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, Jane definitely is open to anybody who looks at her.
Yeah, my favorite, though, was when Mary was talking to her about her friends not liking questions. All they ask for is your trust. She's like, okay, well, I've got another sketchy thing to go do, but if I don't go die doing that sketchy thing, I'll come to your sketchy thing. No problem.
This movie isn't without its flaws, and one of the flaws, or multiple flaws, are Jane's decisions. What Jane chooses to do most of the time, I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Jane's having lunch with her booski, Richard, and she sees the creepy blue-eyed stalker. And she doesn't sit there and be like, hey, I'm in a public place, I'm safe. Richard goes to take a phone call. She can't see him for a millisecond. So she literally runs back to her apartment.
Yeah.
And poor Richard is like, eventually shows up and he's like, oh, here you are. We were having lunch and you just disappeared.
Yeah.
What?
Her decisions of constantly being so scared that she flees do not help her at all.
Yeah.
That just puts her into like Scooby-Doo scenarios.
But things she doesn't really flee are the satanic masses. So we're back to the initials, you know, her first time going to this black mass. She's in a black robe, walking down the steps with Mary. It's such a beautiful scene. And then she sees a crowd of people who look like ghouls. And I mean, I lost it when the main guy has these like clip-on nails. He is just so serious. His hands are in a football goalpost. And then he turns around with these big eyes. And Jane is giving this look of like, like looking around like, y'all seeing what I'm seeing right now? This guy is bonkers.
He had a very Buffalo Bill like
Yes, yeah.
vibe to him.
Those his nails, they looked like the things that Catwoman in Batman Returns puts into her costume.
Oh,
Like those little things she fits over her fingers. But they looked extra long and tapered and painted a nice little blue.
Yes.
Yeah, but I was totally digging that cult music.
The music, phenomenal. The music is so good. I've listened to the soundtrack 3 times. I mean, I really like the music. It does not fit that scene whatsoever.
Baby Jane, e sarai libera.
I think it does. I didn't
that
feel
first
the
one,
music
sure,
was off at all.
You can feel it, but then once it starts going down the rabbit hole, and you're still getting that music where it's like spooky areas, like where she's in her house and the guy's going to stab her, and that music's playing. It's like this very serious, like she could be dying here any moment, but this Quentin Tarantino-esque movie music is playing in the background. It just doesn't. It takes you out. Also, the music was so good that it took me out of the scene because I was like, oh, wait, what was that? Those drums in the background. I don't know, the music was, like I said, the music's so good, but sometimes it just doesn't vibe with the scenes. It just doesn't, for me, it just like, you have 2 great things, you bring it together, and it just doesn't work. And that's how I felt on some of those scenes, because it just, I guess also is like, what should I focus on more? I don't know. But go listen to the soundtrack because it's phenomenal.
Oh, it's such a good soundtrack. But I thought the music fit with the scenes. I mean, the music fit with a 1970s giallo in general, you know? I mean, it doesn't have your typical like creepy music soundtrack where you're like, oh my God, this thing is coming up.
But it does.
It fits with the 1970s giallo.
It does have creepy music, children singing,
yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, it just
that felt like a 1980s cop show. Where like when the bass would come in.
It does have this creepy music, and then it also has like this upbeat, kind of very fun music to it.
Oh, yeah. What was it? The humming at the beginning of the movie, like that.
I love that. I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
It reminded me of, again, the opening of Rosemary's Baby, where you hear the lullaby, but it sounds like the humming or like the little singing in Sleepy Hollow.
They're like la la
yeah
la la.
Yeah. I couldn't play. I kept thinking about it for days. I was like, what does this sound like? But it sounds like the music from Sleepy Hollow.
Yeah, they definitely had creepy music, but they're like, things are happening, kind of like, we need to have something upbeat, kind of like, jingling,
yeah, we need a jam band just to start playing in the background.
But that's the 70s. That's the 70s giallo things,
that those moments of like when the music's like going crazy and it's like this crazy jazz stuff going on, that definitely reminded me of Rosemary's Baby. Like there are a couple scenes where like she's in her apartment building and she's trying to get back to her apartment, and like the music is doing the same thing, and it's just like that chaotic, like stuff's going on and there's chaos and somebody's following me and I gotta get away. And at first, listening to it, I was like, yeah, it doesn't seem like it fits. But then I was like, oh yeah, that there are those scenes in Rosemary's Baby where that same thing happened.
The only rational thing I could bring around to the music being like that was this movie's so dreamlike. Everything's a dreams kind of sequence that is it just supposed to be so different to make it feel more dreamlike, like this weird nightmare? Because your dreams are always so weird, right? So I'm thinking, okay, maybe this music is like this upbeat kind of happiness to this weird, I'm getting stabbed. So maybe it's just like he meant to do it like this. I don't know.
Yeah. In an interview with Sergio Martino, he says that contemporary screenplays succeed in preventing the public from understanding what's before their eyes until the film is almost over. That raises the curiosity level. So he talks about playing with fantasy and reality. So he definitely did that with this film, heavily influenced by Rosemary's Baby. I thought he was really successful with it. It's something that is, he even mentions this in like the interview, which we'll add as a resource, is ahead of its time. He even went as far as to comment about how back in the 70s, the distribution company didn't think that the audience would understand that. They wouldn't understand the scene where she has a premonition of the cult leader killing Richard in the elevator, that they would think that they were playing the same scene twice. But obviously now, this movie came out in 1972, and almost 47, almost 50 years later, we're an audience who is used to that kind of narrative where you're used to dream sequences and playing, understanding fantasy versus reality.
Yeah, we're almost like oversaturated with a lot of this stuff now.
Right?
I was with my friend yesterday. I'm doing a rewatch of Buffy, and I'm splicing an Angel in there because I've never seen Angel. Okay, Buffy and another character, they change bodies. And there was like this like light shimmery thing happened, and there was like the screen got wavy and stuff, and he was just joking, but he was like, just so you know, they switched bodies. And I was like, oh yeah, I've seen enough 90s TV to know that like that shimmery light means that like something weird happened and something switched somewhere.
It's the Wayne's World. Doodle 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 doodle.
Rosemary Baby is a fantastic movie. But one of the like big things what made it so popular was movies like that haven't been really made. I mean, there's a few, sure, but now if you took Rosemary's Baby and you it came out in 2019, there's so many satanic movies and satanic cult movies and demon movies that it could have been just washed over and never seen.
Well, I mean, not to go down a rabbit's hole here. Yes, Rosemary's Baby, had it been made now, but like Rosemary's Baby, like those movies exist because of Rosemary's Baby.
Yeah, well, yeah, and that's what I'm getting at, is like movies were always going to push the limits, but like the whole idea of like the satanic cult at this time, I don't know Italy in this time, so I don't know, like in the United States it was Satanic Panic was every 10 years, right? So a movie comes out, they're like, ooh, it's so scary. But in Italy, they're way more progressive. So I don't know if this would have just been washed over, because giallos are coming out all the time. But now we're introducing these satanic cults. I don't know how this movie was received.
Yeah, I wish I had, if I didn't have to work a job that got in the way of my life, I could do a lot more things. Yeah. But I wanted to look up sort of that same thing. I was very curious as to where this fit in the timeline of what was going on in London, Italy at this time, because I kind of have a vague idea of what was going on here. But also, like I mentioned before, with Richard and his being a pharmaceutical rep, what was it like? How was that different?
I totally agree. Like, I know I mentioned earlier that giallos have deeper meaning than just their absurd, outlandish scenery and like people stabbing people and the super red blood going everywhere. And their black gloves and dancing dolls and like weird shit that happens. But yeah, they have deeper meanings of like political and social issues going on. For this movie, talking about a woman's trauma, you know, including an abortion, like she's unsure, she doesn't feel like herself, she doesn't know whose advice to follow. Like, that's something that people feel today.
Yeah. Richard had told her, "Oh, you're just exhausted."
Yeah.
Like, what kind of like 18th century medical advice is that? Oh, just go take a holiday, you'll be fine.
Put some leeches on your neck and have them suck out the bad blood. So wait, did she have an abortion, or did she get in a car accident and that's what killed the baby?
Well, she got into a car accident, and then I guess she needed an operation that ultimately aborted the baby.
Yeah.
Different time, I guess.
Well, also, I don't know, looking at it at the lens that we're living in today, it's interesting to use those terms intermixed like that, because at that time, I don't know how progressive they were at that time. Would they consider that accident, oh, you had an abortion? Because unfortunately today, some people would consider, oh yeah, you had an abortion, like you killed your baby.
Because you got in a car accident?
Yes.
People are fucking weird.
Yeah.
To save her life?
Something else that makes me intrigued by this and think that Europe is naturally more progressive than the United States.
Because they're way, way, way older. They're angsty teens and we're toddlers.
But they also, like, her and Richard aren't married. So they don't really dwell on the fact that she had an abortion. There's nothing in there that makes her feel she should feel bad that she's not married to Richard, you know, other than Barbara being like, oh, that's why she's not married to you, because, like, you know, Barbara's manipulating Richard, because Barbara's a super manipulator in the movie. There is like a legit film academic, Kat Ellinger, who wrote a book about Sergio Martino, which we'll include in the resources. And I read an article where she talks about this movie, and she comments how it's actually, this movie kind of has female sexuality as a positive. And I say that with a big asterisk because there is, going back to the satanic cult scene, where she is forced to kiss a lot of people and then drink blood, probably in a cup with drugs in it.
Looked like pea soup.
Yeah, that's always uncomfortable to see, and she's obviously uncomfortable, and it's as if, like, we're told kissing and having sex with this cult is gonna make you better, you know, which is not a good idea. But where even in the 70s, like, you have this idea of female sexual power, you know, which is super progressive compared to, like, the US.
Yeah. Anything compared to the US. Italian and French films all had their golden age of film, which were in the 1950s and 1960s, and then they kind of do a little roller coaster. And I don't know, the US has always just dominated the market, and I feel it's a, you know, obviously European films tend to get a little more deep on certain issues and a little more progressive in certain things, where the US has tend to do more blockbusters, big action. But we also have hit a point where the US is starting to kind of take over that trend of, with like a lot of the indie films coming out and stuff, like pushing the limits of boundaries of film now, which is really cool. I mean, we've always been there, but I feel, you know, we're putting out more meaningful films in some aspects.
Like you said before, we're toddlers. We're finally getting to that point.
Into those big boy stages.
Yeah.
But it's weird that the giallos aren't considered part of Italy's golden age of film.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it's very progressive and very, like, pushing the limits and the boundaries of things, but yet it's not what is not there that's making it part of the golden age? Like, what's not? It seems like everything's there. Progressiveness, setting new terms, new technologies. But why is it not considered part of the Italian golden age?
So Sergio Martino definitely admits to like the image of a beautiful woman, you know, under the shower with the killer spying on her from behind the curtains, wet and steamy, has been exploited by him and other filmmakers. And maybe that's why it's not taken seriously. But there is something about Italian films, and maybe it's just because they're European and, you know, someone being naked in there seems more respectful than a US film where it's definitely just being exploited.
Yeah, let's compare this nudity scene where it's very respectful and it's doing like this weird shot of, you know, the glass mirror and you're seeing her and then she's putting clothes on. Or even just like, you know, Jane in bed nude. It's very brief. It's not a thing. And now let's go to like an 80s horror movie from the United States where it's just zooms in, perfectly camera shot right on the boobs, knife going in,
or a kill, a kill right, in her, right in a woman's chest.
Just need the boobs there.
I think part of why the reason I put giallos on the back burner personally was because I knew that there was a lot of nudity, and growing up watching all of these mainstream US horror movies, I saw the exploitation. So I automatically assume, okay, well, that's what it's going to be. And I just want to watch something else. Like, I don't, like, I've seen enough of it. I don't need to see a genre that has a lot of it in it. So I was like, okay, well, I'll get to them when I get to them. Now I'm very curious to see where others measure up to this one.
So do you think that this movie, going back to the first satanic cult, do you think that this movie is exploiting the naked woman's body as much as like what we're, you know, used to seeing in like 80s slashers? This isn't an 80s slasher, so I don't want to compare to it, but
even 1970s movies from the United States, there was
but even like the exploitation of the 1970s, like, when I watch a giallo, I'm not as offended as like other 70s movies.
I can see why on some of these giallos, but there's also American films where I feel it's not in your face. I think it's just more common for American films in the 70s and 80s when nudity was like allowed and becoming allowed in film, that it was used as a tool to sell and market. Whereas these weren't selling and marketing, they were just trying to tell their story. I'm not saying all American films did that, but, you know, American films tend to do big blockbusters. We need to put asses in the seats to sell tickets. It's not about telling a story. It's about making money. It's more of a corporate system.
We need asses in the seats. Let's show some asses.
Exactly. But I also think, you know, Europe, we do say Europe is progressive, but also Europe is very conservative in a lot of ways too. And I do think some of this stuff was pushing limits in Italy for sure. Because also in this 1960s, 1970s, there was a lot of underground like porn rings and porn films coming out in Italy at this time. So, which were getting shut down by government and police. Hence, I think also a lot of like how this movie portrays sexuality also kind of goes with the times in that.
What did you guys think about how the first Black Mass, you know, they give her some dog's blood mixed with drugs, and it cuts to a scene where she's finally able to have sex with her partner, Richard. Did the cult fix her?
I think it's just one hell of an aphrodisiac. It's like they point you in the direction like, yes, they did fix her, and then the next scene is her going to lunch and running away from being scared. So...
yeah, the issue isn't that they're not able to be intimate with each other. The issue is her trauma, and you can't just put a Band-Aid on it. So they may have, with whatever thing they drugged her with. They may have fixed her for that evening, but yeah, like you said, Patrick, next day she's paranoid again. She's going down the rabbit hole of madness, and nothing was fixed.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because we even see Jane, she thought she was better and she's obviously not. And she runs back to the psychiatrist and then, ends up at his country home. What did you guys think about that? Ends up at his country home, and then the blue-eyed stalker manages to kill the psychiatrist's housekeepers.
Before we jump into that, can we talk about that scene, about why she calls the psychiatrist and goes there? Because that scene, the scene before that's probably my favorite scene in the movie.
Ah, yes.
But it's also, I think, the scene in the movie that points in one direction and then totally just like never goes back to it ever again. It's the scene where the blue-eyed man breaks into her home and like stabs her a bunch of times, but then she comes out of this dream and she cut her hand open and she calls the psychiatrist and goes to his office. So that whole scene is like, was she dreaming and the guy was never there, but yet she called the psychiatrist in the dream and managed to go over there? Or did the guy come and he used his supernatural powers and got the fuck out of there and she was like just hallucinating? So I got really confused on that scene. It's my favorite scene because it's beautifully shot and it's so well done.
Mm-hmm.
But I was so confused on that whole, because is it supernatural like power / hallucination? Is she dreaming? Because later on in the movie she dreams something and then it happens and then she knows what to do because it happened. But that never happens with this scene. It's just, did she dream it? Was it hallucination? I don't know. What do you guys' thoughts?
Yeah, I didn't know either. I was confused as well, but I liked it because it was like a guessing game the whole movie, and I like that it continued with this, and it's like, oh god, did she hallucinate that, or was he able to just slip out of there, and are people gaslighting her? Like, what's going on? And because I have seen Rosemary's Baby so many times, like then her calling the psychiatrist and, I'll send help, and it's like, oh my god, but then is he part of it? And I don't know what's going on.
It's funny, the psychiatrist was the only one I'd never thought was like, thought he was going to be innocent the entire film, and it turned out he was. Also,
Yeah.
I would love to have a psychiatrist just be like, come stay at my estate in the country.
Yeah, there's so much uncertainty and you don't know who to trust during the entirety of the movie, even all the way through to the end. Yeah, I had that same question about the blue-eyed stalker. Like, he is so quick. He knows exactly where to go. He kills everybody in the right, instant. I thought, he was working with her sister Barbara, where by the end of the movie, we learned Barbara was just trying to kill Jane to take all the money that apparently the guy who killed their mom, which I was like, wait, what?
Yeah, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
That came in.
The guy who killed their mom died in New Zealand and left them all of his money, which was apparently like 600,000 pounds. And which I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. And then apparently Barbara just wanted to ultimately kill Jane so that Barbara would get all the money. But then Jane ends up getting all the money, which Richard knows about. So, like, Richard is always still an uncertain character, even all the way through the end. So, my guess is some of these scenes, she's hallucinating or it's in a dream sequence, and some of them are real. The blue-eyed stalker was at the country home of the psychiatrist and killed the housekeepers.
Their deaths.
Which I thought was such a great scene,
Yeah.
because they're in the kitchen and they look like they're just sitting there, and then she realizes that they're dead and that the blue-eyed stalker is in the house. So I just assumed that Barbara told the blue-eyed stalker, like, go here and like fucking keep killing everybody.
Why didn't he just kill her at that moment? I mean, he obviously had to take the time to kill Mr. and Mrs. Maine and then set them and prop them up in the kitchen like that. He could have just taken the time to go stab her while she was sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, she definitely was sleeping. That's a really good question. I don't know. I mean, she was already having issues, so her being dead could have easily been hidden by a suicide attempt. As we later learn that, like, even though Richard shot Barbara because Barbara brought a gun out as she was going to slowly kill Richard, but then Richard shoots Barbara, in a dramatic scene.
Dun dun.
And then everybody thinks, towards the end of the movie, the cop, person is like, Barbara killed herself. But then Jane at the end of the movie was like, I know that you killed her to Richard. So there's a lot of, we know what's happening, we don't know what's happening. There's a lot of things that don't make sense.
The scene where, one thing that really doesn't make sense is the scene where Barbara's shot. Why are her beads constantly swaying? What is making them sway over and over and over again violently? I sat there watching, like, he comes out from the beads and then, like, they're doing their whole talk and the whole background is just, and then she gets shot and then they're like, move 10 times faster. And I'm like, what is happening? And that letter, like, he throws the letter on her and we never see what's in the letter or what it really says, just besides, this told me everything. That was like the biggest problem I had with this movie was like this, how fast they like wrapped it up at the end.
Yeah.
It was like, oh, we're going to draw, everything's going to be drawn out and we're done. I was like, oh, okay.
Even the lawyer was like, here's the will, and he kind of throws it on the desk and it doesn't even get close to her. I love how people like throw things like,
I know.
Yeah, well, here's this.
Like he couldn't.
I'm Italian.
He couldn't be nice enough just to hand it. He's like, get this out of here.
Right? You missed your 3:30 meeting that I barked at you to come to, and your sister was way more easy to get a hold of, but I gave you a time and you didn't show up. What the fuck?
I gave you a time and a place with no explanation. Why weren't you there?
Yeah, and then like when they cut to that right before, the lawyer comes in and the police officer is just like naming everyone a part of it. I'm like, who the fuck's that person? Who's that person? Did we see this one? I'm like, oh, they're the cult members. Now they're all dead.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to just get out there from the very beginning, and nobody's brought it up, but yes, this movie takes place in London, and yes, everybody speaks Italian. Deal with it.
I know. I wanted to say that, but I'm like, it is what it is. 1970. Even if they weren't speaking Italian, they were probably so high on LSD or coke they thought they were speaking Italian. It was a weird time.
Everyone in Jane's apartment, like huge ass complex, speaks Italian. Yes.
Yeah, it's like Midsummer. I can understand you.
Oh, I do want to say, so at the end of the movie, when that guy is attacking Jane on the roof, him falling off the building, that is the funniest stuffed man falling I've seen in a long time.
It's so good, but they did such a good job with like cutting from like the guy to the throwing the stuffed scarecrow off.
But it's so funny because he like falls and then it cuts to him falling and you can always tell it's just like this stuffed straw just slowly floating down in the wind.
It caught an updraft.
So, there's a few edits in the movie where they go to stab, where he goes to like stab her and it's just like cut and it's him stabbing her again and then cut and it's like the knife moving over and over again. If they were to do that edit with man jumping off the roof, the movie would have been gone up another point in my book. But then it just ends right there. He hits the floor and it ends.
Okay, now I have something to say. There is a website I came across. It's called offscreen.com. And the person wrote a review of this movie, and there was an interesting tidbit that I don't know if either of you came across about when this was released in the US, the drug ring, that whole ending plot about the drug ring, that was cut.
Whoa.
So, yeah, so it essentially ended. Where did it end? Okay, so when the part where you think Jane is murdered, and then it goes into the whole plot about the whole drug ring, the US cut stops right where you think Jane has been murdered, and that's the end of the movie. It also cut out the beginning opening credit scene, like with the what we were talking about before with the tree and the colors and everything.
Why did they cut
That
that
was
out?
cut. I don't know. That was a great little. That was the title of the movie. It's a great segue into the story.
Yeah.
I don't know why they would cut
it's
that.
a descent into madness.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting that the US version, it cut out that whole extra, like the ending and the reveal of what was going on, and it makes it a totally different movie.
Oh, for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. I would kind of like to see that version now to see which one I would prefer to watch.
Definitely gonna put that in the we're gonna link in the notes. So yeah, it was a very interesting article.
Like, I also like the fact that this movie takes place in London, I feel is like an added level of
what the
being
fuck?
outside of yourself. Yeah, and being like, wait, what? Is like definitely adds to the confusion of this movie. Because you're like, wait, you're in London. Also because when he writes the note to her in lipstick on the mirror, it's in English.
Yeah, and in the beginning of the movie, I'm pretty sure there's like 2 sentences spoke in English when Richard first comes in, and then it switches straight to Italian. So
that'd be really funny if when there was a voiceover of the message on the mirror and it's written in English, if the subtitles were then in Italian.
Okay, and that's another reason why I don't trust Richard is who the fuck takes red lipstick and writes a message on a mirror like that?
A monster.
You have books, you have paper everywhere in that place. Why would you like, you know what? This kind of looks like my blood. I'll write it in this lipstick.
I'll make life for Jane a little more difficult.
Yeah. Increase her trauma a little more.
Right. And then she like goes to like wipe it off because she's like upset by it.
Because a psychopath does that.
But like watching this movie, I was like, what demon, occult, whatever do I have to pledge my allegiance to have my makeup, my hair, and my lighting look that good every single day? Like, go to bed like that, wake up like that, go to the shower like that with her like magenta eyelashes stuck on perfectly.
Holly, can you explain to me how they did the under eye eyeliner look that was like a straight line, and they didn't look like beautiful goth babes, but they looked like everyday like fantasy babes?
I don't know, because I've tried that before and it just comes out a mess.
Yeah, right?
I never follow, like, I don't know. I want to try it though, but she had that wonderful like bottom strip of lashes that was perfectly straight too. I was like, man, your makeup artists are, man, they're working it.
It's easy to do.
Oh, one thing I wanted to mention, I really liked all the staircase shots. Unfortunately, Patrick, I know this hits a little too close to home right now, but it gives a big sense of vertigo and losing control, and it just amplifies the whole story of, is this an unreliable narrator? Are we witnessing her losing control? Or is there something outside happening to her? And I really like those shots.
Yeah. All right. We are going to rate this movie on sacrificial knives. How many knives out of 5 would you rate this movie? Patrick.
3.5 sacrificial knives. It's a very fun, good movie, beautifully shot. The actress is flawless. There's a lot I like about this movie, but it did have some issues, kind of dragged on, and then the quick wrap up kind of was like, nah, you kind of didn't think much of it. You just added it in there. But there's a lot I really do like about this movie, and I'll probably watch it again. So, 3.5.
Holly?
I am going to give it 2 plus 2 sacrificial knives for a total of 4. I really, really enjoyed this more than I thought I would. I kind of feel like it's an Italian cousin to Rosemary's Baby, and I can see this going in my rotation, like once a year watching this one. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with it. It was a good mystery. It was a good psychological mystery. And yeah, it had great music. It had a kaleidoscope filter at one point.
Yep.
Which do you guys remember those little kaleidoscope toys? They're really tiny. Just hold it up to one eye.
Mm-hmm. Of course.
We have one of those, and I was looking through it yesterday, and I was just spinning it, and I was like, oh yeah, it's like a 70s movie.
You should have watched the whole movie with it.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely had a lot of fun with this one, and it gave me an appreciation. Well, no, it gave me an interest in watching giallos, and I hope that I can continue this journey with them and find some more that I like, because it's going to be a tough one to beat.
Nice. I'm intrigued to see, Holly, why did people think it wasn't a giallo based on what you read?
Oh, I was reading that. Now, this is with me not having a lot of knowledge of them, but from what I understand, a typical giallo, it's got the whole mystery of like hands and gloves, and you just see like a hand stabbing somebody, and just everything is really more about the mystery, where this seems to be more about the psychological approach, with the mystery bits being more secondary. So I was reading that a lot of people were like, oh, I don't really consider it a true giallo, but that's what, while I was watching it the first time, I was kind of thinking, oh, this doesn't seem like TV setup as I thought it would be. And then reading everybody's comments about it, I was like, oh, okay, well, this is what it seems like, a little bit of an exception to the genre. So I am very curious to see what others are like stacked up against this one.
Yeah. Definitely check out Bay of Blood. Blood and Black Lace, which is on Shudder. That is such a good giallo. If you're gonna watch one giallo, watch that giallo.
I agree. I think I watched that with you.
It's so good. So I am going to rate this 4 out of 5 sacrificial knives. It satiates my giallo desires. This movie starts off so super ridiculous, and it goes down this rabbit hole of uncertainty and not knowing who to trust. And the first time I watched it, I was like super intrigued. It kept my interest the entire time. And then watching it multiple times afterwards, I have a deeper understanding of what's going on and why, Sergio Martino did what he did and the story he's trying to tell. And I really like it. It really does a good job of talking about a woman's trauma and all the advice that you get and not knowing what to follow. And I love that one of the advice is joining a psychosexual satanic cult, I mean, why not? There's definitely some uncomfortable scenes in the movie, but I don't want that to prevent anybody from watching it because they're like offended by like a rape scene. I feel that Sergio Martino does a good job of showing naked versus nudity, you know, in the sense of naked being unwelcomed vulnerability versus nudity is welcomed vulnerability. And I think he does a good job of displaying vulnerability in the movie through Jane, and the manipulation of that with Richard and the cult and Mary and Barbara. You know, there's plenty of mystery behind this giallo, and we're still left with not knowing who to really trust in the end.
Well put.
Half a bottle of wine and some CBD oil. That's what you get. You can catch this movie on Shudder as of September 4th. Or you can buy the Blu-ray, which is full of extras and interviews and different versions of the film from Severin Films. Thank you so much for listening and hopefully subscribing to the podcast. Please check us out on horrormelee.com, like our Facebook page, and follow us on Instagram.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.